Okay, we'll get started. All right, so welcome to 6150 Security Evaluation Methodologies. My name's Jeremy. You can call me Jeremy, you can call me Professor Clark, whatever you want. What I'll do for the first bit is we'll just go through the course outlines, the requirements. At some point, the IT people will come and try and hopefully get the laptop working. Okay, so you should all have access to the course website on Moodle. I'm going to use Moodle this year. If you don't have access, it could be that you're not registered somehow. That would have to get resolved. And the other reason could be that you are on the waiting list for the course. If you're on the waiting list, I can put you on the Moodle. Just send me an email with your student number, come see me at the break or after class, and I can put you on Moodle. That's it. I can't put you in the class. I don't have that power, but I can at least give you access to the Moodle until the drop deadline, and then you can see whether you make it into the course or not. Okay, so I'll start with the course outline, and then we'll just go through. Okay, so my name, my email, my website. I have office hours. Office hours will be every week on Thursday. They'll be at 2 o'clock. They're virtual. They're on Zoom. They're drop-in, which means you don't have to email ahead of time. You just show up. I will, if no one's there, like by 10 after, I'll leave. Or if there's 5 minutes goes by and no new students join, I'll leave. So if you're late or whatever, you can just drop me an email if you want to talk, and that's fine. If you log in and you see that you're in the waiting room, that means that I'm with another student. Zoom doesn't show you how many people are in the waiting room or what order you're in or anything like that. It's kind of a shortcoming of the interface. So just wait around and eventually I'll admit you. By contrast, if you log in and it says waiting for hosts to sign in, that's the other kind of error message. That means I'm not actually in the Zoom call. There is a chance I've forgotten before. Give me 5 minutes, if it's 1 minute after 2, maybe I'm in the process of joining. But if it's 5 after 2 and I haven't joined and you need to talk to me, send me an email right away, and I'll usually get a notification on my phone or whatever from the email. And worst case, you can always ask me by email anything anyways. So if you don't have to join the office hours, I'm available during the break. We'll have a break in the middle of the class. I'm available after class to answer your questions. And so office hours usually are not very busy anyways, because most people just ask their questions when they see me otherwise. Or they want an answer right away, so they send me an email. So those I'm good with all of those things. Okay, next is the calendar description, which you can read. The whole course is on Moodle, so all the slides for the whole course are there already. So if you want to know, or you want to know what the course is or how technical it is or things like that, you can always just go ahead and look at the slides. All the lectures are online from last year as well on YouTube. I think the way the Moodle's set up right now, if you click on it, it will start showing you videos from last year. But then as we record the videos for this year, I'll replace them. Okay, there's no prerequisites for the course. There's no specific knowledge. Sometimes people are wondering if it's really programming heavy or coding heavy, and the answer is no, it's not. There's a few occasions where we might look at some code together and see something that went wrong, but it would be tens of lines of code, and it's just pseudocode anyways. It's not real code. So you don't have to have a programming background. You don't have to have a math background. I don't think there's any math in the course at all. And if you're from quality, not from security, there might be some extra background reading, because sometimes we just assume that people know some basic things about security and we don't explain them very well. But I've had lots of people from quality take the course. They do fine in the end. They just might have to like, Google a few things to follow along or that type of thing. The material for the course is just based on the slides. So all the exam questions, assignment questions, all that type of stuff is just based on the slides and what I say in class as well. So I should note that sometimes I might say something, but it's not explicitly written on the slide. You're still responsible for it. But anything that's additional, extra textbooks, extra articles, there is a bunch of stuff on Moodle. So usually what I do is like, there might be like 2 lectures on social engineering. I will read an entire book and then I'll condense it down to 2 lectures. Then I'll give you a link to the book, and everything I say like comes from the book somewhere. And if you want a different perspective, or if you want more detail, or maybe you're doing a project on it and you're extra interested, then you'll find all the stuff in the book. But do you have to read the book? No. There's no way you're going to read an entire book just to cover 2 weeks. And am I going to ask you a question that's from the book but I didn't cover in class? No, I'm not going to do that either. Okay. The lecture notes are now slides, so I slowly transitioned away from handwritten notes. So they're slides. The slides are already there. Maybe I modified them a bit before, but more or less I think they're pretty much fixed. So you can read ahead if you want to look at them. The lectures themselves I'll record. So right now I am recording the audio and what's on my screen. And if you miss a class or something like that, you can still catch up. Now the recording, I want to stress, is a best effort. Okay, so let's say something goes wrong. I think I've been recording my lectures for, I don't know, like 5-7 years. And there have been like maybe 2 or 3 times in all of that time period where something went wrong, but it occasionally goes wrong. And so I can't like say, oh, I'm not going to put that lecture on the exam because the recording didn't work. Okay, so you still are responsible for coming to class, but 99% of the time the recording works. And if you don't come to class, you're going to have a recording. And then the other thing is, because I've taught this course lots of times, last year's lecture of the same material and the same slides is also recorded and on YouTube, right? So like in worst case scenario, just watch last year and probably what I said then and what I say now is no different, right? As far as like the key points that would be on an exam, there won't be a difference between them. Okay, so no stress if you have to miss a class here and there. You should be covered between all of that stuff. Okay, so the grading scheme will consist of a final exam, project, 2 assignments. So this is probably pretty standard. The only weird thing is maybe that there's not a midterm. So for this course, it's just going to be a final, no midterm. And the exam I'll circle back to in a minute. Actually, okay, let me just talk about it now since it's on our minds. So if you scroll way down to the bottom of the Moodle, I have a bit of information about the exam. Sorry, on my other laptop, I have actually last term's course. It's not the same. I'm just gonna fix that. Okay, so the first thing I'll draw your attention to is actually the bottom part, the scheduling. So the final exam will be sometime between April 18th and May 1st. That's the exam period this year, okay? What date it actually is, I don't choose. I have no control over it, okay? I just tell the department I want a final exam. They have to schedule it for all the courses. They have to make sure that you guys don't have more than 3 exams in the same day and whatever. There's a bunch of constraints and stuff that they try and take care of. So I don't choose it. Sometimes you want to travel more at the end of the fall term maybe than the end of the spring term, or the winter term, but you still might be wanting to travel around that time. Don't go booking plane tickets and things like that until you find out when the exam is. Okay, you can't move your exam or defer it, or I can't ask for an earlier exam or a later exam because someone has travel plans. Okay, it's not a legitimate excuse. So just keep those dates open. It could be any time in that date. And then usually it's like maybe February, end of February, where they'll post the schedule, and then you can start booking things. When it will be available, it will be available at this website. So it's obviously not available yet, but you can see like last term's exam schedule, for example. So this is what it will look like when it comes out.
So, but it will be on Friday only, right?
No, so that's another thing that I would say they try to do, but they're not required to do. So normally what they do is they pick, like today's a Friday class, so the first Friday after they'll put the schedule, and then because people don't have the same class at the same time, they won't have the same exam at the same time, right? So it's an easy rule, but sometimes it doesn't necessarily follow that. So I wouldn't hedge, like I would hedge my bets that they'll follow that by not booking anything anyways. The other thing that's sort of complicated this year, which I'll go through now because it's kind of related, is so we're a Friday class, right? And this always happens in the winter term. Sorry, I'm in my other course. Okay, so we'll have lectures every week, right? Eventually we're going to hit reading week. You'll have a week off, then we'll come back and we'll have lectures again. But then there's the Easter holiday. Okay, so the Easter holiday is a Friday and a Monday. We're a Friday class, so we're impacted. But all your other classes that aren't on Friday are not impacted. So all your other classes are going to have a class that week. We're not going to have a class that week. So we're going to fall out of sync with everyone else. Okay, so it happens every winter for classes on Fridays and Mondays. So what they'll do is classes will end on like a Monday, okay? And then the Tuesday after, all the classes that are on Fridays will have an extra lecture on a Tuesday, okay? So we'll have our last Friday class, and then you're going to come back the next Tuesday, and then we're going to have our actual last class. Then exams will start. There'll be a day or two off, and then exams will start, right? So because that Tuesday's in there too, it also throws off that kind of rule about, is the exam going to be on the Friday after? Maybe it's on the Tuesday after, or maybe it's on some other, completely other day kind of thing, okay? So anyways, as we approach these dates, I'll be reminding you, and trust me, I'll tell you every class, like for the 3 classes before, so you're not going to forget about it, but yeah. Okay, there's some information about the exam. Like you don't have to worry about this for 3-4 months, so I'll tell you it now, but ask me a couple weeks before the exam and I'll go over it again. Basically, it will be in person. You'll have 3 hours to write it, but I don't write a 3-hour exam. I try and write an exam that's maybe an hour and a half or 2, but if you want to use the full time, you can. Questions could be short answer, they could be true, false, they could be multiple choice. For multiple choice, you'll do it on a Scantron form, so that's like those bubbles where you fill in with a pencil. You'll have a cheat sheet, so anything you want to write down, you can put on a piece of paper. So the exam will not have any memorization at all. Okay, so anything that you're scared that you're going to forget in the exam, write it on your sheet, and then you can bring that in. It's all going to be conceptual questions. If English isn't your first language, you need a dictionary. That's fine, you can bring it. And if you really want to bring a calculator, you can bring it, but I promise you won't need it. Okay. Okay, so that's the final exam. The project I'll talk about after the course outline. So let me go through the whole course outline, then I'll talk about the project itself. You'll have 2 assignments. Both assignments are available today. So if you want to look ahead and see and look at them, you can look at them. The material, though, to understand the assignment won't be covered until maybe about 2 weeks before the assignment will be due. So generally, I won't give you, the due date of the assignment will be at least 2 weeks after we cover the material that you need to know to actually do the assignment. Yeah, and they're individual assignments. You'll do them individually. They're kind of open-ended assignments. So like, even though everyone's getting the same question, you should all have like slightly different takes on how you do it. And they just directly, like you'll learn a concept in class and then we'll ask you to do it on the assignment to a new scenario that's different than the scenario we talk about in class. Okay, the course outline, I realize I didn't change it. When we used to have 13-week classes, now we have 12. So that's a new addition. But basically, you can imagine week 13 just disappears. And then this more or less follows. But the better thing is to look at the Moodle, because the Moodle actually has all the slides already. So you can see the week by week breakdown. There's some links to different resources that you might need across the year. So you've probably seen this type of thing from your other courses. I don't know, maybe the two that are relevant. This is a late class, so if you have some safety concerns about walking home at 9 or whatever, there are programs for that. And if you need special accommodations for your assignments, for your exams, that type of thing, there's an office. You can register with them. I'll get an email. It'll be all kept confidential. And then whatever the accommodation is that you're afforded, we'll honor, obviously. So sometimes students might have extra time on exams or things like that, or be able to write with headphones, or there's different accommodations, okay? So make use of that. But you do have to register. You have to register. You can't just show up to the exam and ask for an accommodation. It has to go through the office. Okay, so that was what I wanted to say about the course outline. Aside from the project, which I'll talk about now, is there any other questions about anything else besides the project?
So can we take this course in the first semester of information system security?
Yeah.
Fine.
Yeah. As far as I know, yeah. So it's not a required course, I don't think, for anyone, thesis or course-based or PhD. And as far as I know, you're free to do them in any order, unless if there's a prerequisite. Yeah. So. How many are in your first term, out of curiosity? Like your first term at Concordia? Okay, a few. And second term? Most of you? Okay. And then something beyond second term? A few of you. All right. Okay. So most of you started in the fall, I guess, and then, yeah. And is anyone in my blockchain course as well? Just a couple, okay, yeah.
So is there any foundation course required for this particular course?
Yeah, so I teach it in a way that I don't assume anything about you. So it wouldn't have to be that way. I could teach it in a way that I assume you have 6110, which actually is very useful for one of the first topics that we'll talk about, which is called HTTPS. But I will, I'm going to assume that you don't have any of those courses. And I don't think that any of the courses really would give you a head start. Maybe knowing a bit about crypto, you'll find some discussions a little easier to follow. But yeah, it really is like, it could literally be the first course that you take, and it would be fine. Yep. Sure. Yep.
So if we have another class on Tuesday, then
yeah, okay. So let me explain this again. So let's say you have a Tuesday and a Friday class. You're in my class and you also have a Tuesday class. This week you had a class both days. Actually, my blockchain class is a Tuesday class, so this is a great example. Yeah. Okay, so it's week 1 for both classes, all the way down to reading week. We all take a week off, then we come back, and it's like week 8, week 9. Then all of a sudden it's Easter, right? So the next week, the Tuesday class will have a class, we won't. So they'll go to like week 10, but we'll be at week 9. And then they'll go to week 11, but we'll only be at week 10, right? Then they'll hit week 12 the same week we hit week 11. So that Tuesday class is now done. That week it's done. So the following Tuesday, when we have our makeup lecture, the Tuesday classes have already had 12 lectures. So they're complete. And that's actually what frees up the Tuesday for us to use. And then we'll have our 12th lecture. Does that make sense? Yeah. So that special week, if you have a Tuesday class, you won't have class. You'll be done your class. And if you have a Friday class, you'll have your last lecture on a Tuesday. Okay. It's confusing, but anyways, don't think too much about it. Just like when it comes up, you'll understand it better. Yeah. Okay, but if you have like sometimes, I don't know, people have work schedules or daycare schedules or whatever, and you need to think about getting a Tuesday off as well, at least that one time. Or you can watch the recording. Okay, other questions about the course outline? Okay, so let me jump into the project then. Okay, so the project will be due the day of the last class, so I guess that's the Tuesday. In terms of just physical submission, you'll submit it through through Moodle, itself. So this page that you're looking at on Moodle has somewhere a way to submit it. I think because I'm an instructor, it doesn't show me the same interface that you'll see as a student, but there'll be a way to submit it itself. Also, I guess it maybe doesn't accept submissions until that date, which is just an arbitrary date. Okay. In terms of, I'll talk a bit about what the project is, but before I get there, I'll just say that it's a written report, okay? So it's going to be a PDF. You'll give it to me through Moodle. You'll upload it. There will be an opportunity to do, for more than one student if you want to. In that case, just one student has to submit it. It doesn't matter which student actually does it. And then there's some advice on how to name the file just so it's easy for me to download. Okay, so the project will be a written report, and you're free to do one of two things, okay? First off, the subject of the topic is wide open, okay? So you can do anything. It just has to do with security, and it has to do with evaluation of security. So evaluation is really just a fancy way of saying, how do you know that something's secure? Like if I tell you it's secure, well, why did I say that? How do you know it? What's the process? What's the reason? For like, what's my basis for saying that it's secure or not, okay? So as long as you have a component of, you just don't talk about, oh, that's secure and that's not secure and not say why. As long as you're talking about why, then it fits within the theme of the course, then it's fine, okay? And what you can do is you can either try to do something new that no one's done before, or what you can do is you can try and summarize what other people have done, okay? Most students probably, 80, 90% do the latter. Okay, they're going to do some sort of survey. Every now and then there's students that do novel, especially if you're in like a PhD program or maybe a thesis-based master's, then you might want to get a paper out of your project and try and do something more along those lines. Okay. Okay, so the requirements are you can work by yourself. You can work in groups of 2, 3, up to 4. Every rule that I tell you can be broken if you ask me first, okay? So if you don't want to talk to me ever about your project and you follow these rules, it's fine. But if you want to have a team of 5 for some reason, come talk to me. It's probably okay, but you just have to have a reason for whatever you want to do, okay? Now, I should say that I expect more the more team members there are, okay? So if there's 4 names on a report and it looks the same as a report filed by one person, then there's going to be there'll be a deduction based on that too, okay? So you can't just add people's names to your projects. It's going to hurt you. If you do a project and you add 3 names to it, it's going to hurt you because if they're not contributing extra work, then you're going to get a deduction as a result, okay? But that said, like every year, like the best project, who gets the highest mark in the class? Some years, the highest marks are a single person. Some years it's a group of 4. Okay, so I'm not trying to steer you to an individual. I'm not steering you towards a big group or a middle group. Like it really doesn't matter. I've seen projects that are great from all sizes. So just have a reason for it. Like, why do I want to collaborate? Do I need extra people? Is it there's too much information for one person? Is it, oh, that person's the coder and this person's the math person and this person? Like, if there's a reason to put your team together, then do it, right? If it's just sort of an arbitrary thing, then think about why you're doing it anyways. Okay, the report should be no more than 8 pages of content. It can be less if you want. And that doesn't matter if you're 1 person or 4 people, okay? And so this is the way academic research works. If you have a conference, there's always a page limit. You can have 20 people doing a huge thing, and you can have 1 person doing 1 report on 1 thing, and the page limit's always the same, okay? Usually what happens if there's more group members, I expect the density of the paper to go up, okay? There's more kind of ideas per page because of all the work that went into it, okay? So the size of a paper really isn't a good metric of how good it is, right? You can have 100 pages and not be very good, and have something that's 4 pages and be great, okay? So it's 8 pages. Again, every rule can be broken if you ask me, okay? So if you need 9 pages because your references don't fit, if you need 10 pages because you have a bunch of pictures, whatever, just come talk to me and it's probably fine. Why do I limit to 8? Because I have to read it. You usually don't think about the flip, right? But I get 40, 50. If everyone does an individual, I might have 100 pages. 100 students. 100 times 8 is 800 pages. 800 pages is a lot, right? That's like a book. And you guys want your mark in a week. If I don't have your mark done in a week, you're like, when's the mark coming? When's the mark coming, right? And so I read them fast. Another thing I should say is I just can't give you notes or comments, okay? I read it, I give you a mark. There is a reason why, but I don't even write that reason down, because if I had to do it for 800 pages, it's too much. I can't do that. But after, if you want to at least have a breakdown of your mark, there are some categories that I'll show you in a second that I look at, and I can give you a breakdown of what it is. And yeah.
Is novelty important?
So it is if you do the first type, I guess. So if you want to do a novelty, I'll talk a bit more about what these two things are once we get through them. But so some great projects are the ones that do the novel research, and then novelty is important. So you want to do something that no one's done before. Like they could have done something close, but there's something at least a little bit unique about what you're doing. And then a system, what I call systemization of knowledge, which I'll define in a second, is like there's no novelty. It's just you're telling me about stuff that other people have written, but just in your own words, kind of thing. Yeah. Okay. In terms of the template, it doesn't matter. 8 pages, any format. Just use the default in Word. Use the default in LaTeX if you use LaTeX. If you want to make it look like an academic paper, you can use any conference, ACM, IEEE, whatever. They all have templates. So do whatever you want. I don't need a cover page. I mean, if you submit one, it's fine. But like literally just the title. Every student and their student number needs to be there right at the very top, please. But then beyond that, then it can just be introduction and you go right into the first sentence. Plagiarism is something I'll spend a bit of time on. So plagiarism, as you probably know from other courses, and if you don't, you're going to hear about it every course. So this is copying other people's ideas without attribution. The classic example of plagiarism that's very clearly wrong and everyone basically knows it's wrong is if you go somewhere, you find some good text, you copy and paste it into your own. You don't cite it, you don't quote it, or anything like that. Okay, you pass it off as if you wrote it, but you didn't actually write it. Okay, and that can apply to projects that people have written in past terms as well. Okay, which I keep an archive of. Okay, so you can't copy text verbatim. Okay, you can copy if you put it in quotation marks. Okay, if you quote it, I'd say it's pretty unusual in computer science that people do a lot of quotations. Usually if you quote something, it's because you want to critique it. But normally you don't like compile a paper of quotes from other places. Okay, usually you try and re-explain things in your own words. All right, so that's clear plagiarism. Another case of plagiarism that's less easy for people to understand, but we see it all the time, and the university considers it plagiarism. And plagiarism is very serious, by the way. There's a whole academic offense that's attached to it and things like that. So you don't want to risk it. So it's called mosaic plagiarism. So mosaic plagiarism would be like, I find some text, I really like it, I don't want to plagiarize. I copy and paste it in my paper, and then I change some of the words, to words that mean the same thing, but they're a little different, or I change the grammar, I kind of move things around. Okay, but the text is still the same. It has the same meaning. It's still making the same argument, the same logical flow. So you're stealing the idea and the way of articulating that idea, even if you aren't word for word using the same words. Okay, so that's also considered plagiarism. If you see a case, they'll have the original text, they'll have the new text, and if two people read through them and it's obvious that this text was derived from the other text, then it's considered plagiarism. Okay, now again, you can, with enough citation, it's fine. Okay, so as long as you acknowledge where it's from, then it's not a problem. Okay, okay. So what do you do to make sure that this doesn't happen? So I suggest like 2-3 things. The first thing is read something, understand it, close it, don't even have the text open, and then just rewrite it in your own words. Okay, so that's good. Then you won't, unless if your memory is photographic, you're not going to say the same thing the same way. Second thing is cite. Even in that case, you still have to cite because you got the idea from somewhere. Now, sometimes students think that citations look bad. It looks like you're not thinking enough for yourself. Okay? In academia, that is not true. That's the opposite of true. Okay? There's a lot of academic papers, especially the kind of paper that I'm asking for, the systemization of knowledge, where it's like sentence citation, sentence citation, sentence citation. Okay? You can't have too many citations. If every sentence has a citation, if there's a paragraph that has a citation, like if there's a ton of citations all through it, that looks actually right. That's not a wrong thing. It's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Okay? So be liberal in your citations. And the third thing is, if it's complicated, if you're not sure how to cite it, like I used it, but then I changed the words, and I'm really not sure like what's the proper way to do it, the way you can do is just say it in the writing itself. Okay? So the way you write your paper can be conversational, like we're talking face to face. So you could come to me and say, hey, there was this list of 5 things, and I want that list in my paper. And, the author gave names to each of these 5 things, and they're good names. Like, why should I change the names? Like, just to avoid plagiarism or whatever, right? So you just told me that. Well, in the paper, you do the same thing. You just tell the reader. So you say, hey, Bonnet et al., like these authors, came up with a list of 5 things, right? Citation. Here they are, right? And then you list them. And then I read it, and it's clear. This isn't your list. You didn't make it up. You didn't come up with the words. Right, you took it from this source, right? So that it's fine, right? So that's how you can write your paper. So it doesn't have to be very formal. The format of the citations, all that stuff doesn't matter, okay? So just tell me, like through the writing itself, like why are you citing this, or like what are you citing from it? Like what are you taking from it? Like this idea is from this paper, or these properties are from this paper, or that type of thing. Does that make sense? Okay, so lots of citations. Never copy and paste, even if you are going to tweak it, because you might forget to tweak it and you might not tweak it enough. And just say in a conversational style what you're doing in the paper, and then it will be fine. You won't have any problems. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about just different tips for the papers. Okay, so let's say that you don't want to do a novel research idea. Let's say you want to do what's called the systemization of knowledge, which sounds like a survey, but it's like, I'm going to try and distinguish between what I want, which is an SOK, and what I don't want, which is a survey. Okay, so both of them are about a topic. So you'll pick a topic, and your paper is going to be about the topic. You're going to read a lot of other papers and things that other people have written, and then you're going to come up with what you want to say about the topic, and you're going to put in your paper. Okay, so that's it. Okay. Now, a survey, the starting point of a survey is the other papers that you're going to read. So a survey would be like, I'm going to read these 5 papers, and my report is going to be a summary of what's in these 5 papers. Paper 1 says this. Paper 2 says this. Paper 3 says this. Okay? That's a survey. I'm saving you the work of reading those papers by giving you a summary of all of them. Okay? I don't want that. Okay? What I want instead is I want a report on a subject. Okay? So you're going to pick a topic or a subject. You're going to still read those 5 papers, right? But it's not going to be about like what this paper says and this paper says. You're just going to tell me about the subject. And if what you happen to be talking about came from paper 1, then you'll be citing paper 1. And then you might switch to another topic, and that was covered in paper 4, then you'll talk about it in paper 4. And then paper 5 might like talk a little bit about your subject and a lot about something that's not relevant to your subject. You're not even going to cite the part that's not relevant, right? You're only going to pull in the little bits that you need. Okay? So the point is you start with the subject first, and then the papers you just pull in because you need them. You need to teach yourself from somewhere. Okay? It's not, the objective isn't to get you to go out and summarize papers. Okay? It's about to get you to understand a topic, and then you're going to have to read in order to understand it. Okay? So something to help you understand is pretend that I've read every paper that you cite. Okay? If it's a survey, that's a problem because you're just telling me what I already know. Okay? If it's an SOK, I still might learn something from your paper, right? Because you're comparing and contrasting between these papers. You have a different way of explaining it than the authors. You see things that they don't see, or they tell you all the good features, but they don't really tell you the bad, and you're going to give a more balanced view that balances the good and bad. I can learn a lot from an SOK even if I've read every paper that it cites. Okay? But a survey, I'm not going to learn anything because it's just a summary of what I've already read. Okay? So that's sort of a test for where it is. Now, am I going to be like super strict about this? No, right? I'm just trying to steer you toward this type of paper as opposed to the survey type of paper. Yeah, and so you can think about the weaknesses of papers, how they relate. Remember, papers are also written in a chronological order, right? So a paper that's written 1 year won't be able to comment on a paper that's written after it, right? And so that's your job. You read both of those papers, and so you have to think, hey, if this second paper that came after happened to be around when this first paper was written, what would the author said about the second paper? Okay, so these are the kinds of insights you can have, but the authors don't. You can't talk about things that aren't even written yet. Okay, because you're doing a subject first, there's no, you have to read 3 papers or make sure you have 5 papers. It's none of that. Okay, if you're doing a survey, that would be the requirement. Here, it doesn't matter. Okay, do they have to be papers? They don't. Okay, so you can cite anything that's relevant. Okay, so you might pick a brand new topic. Academic research is slow. Usually takes 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years before things that people are doing today are actually there's papers about them. Okay. That said, you should check the academic papers. Okay. So if there's a big academic paper in that area and you miss it, that will be a problem. Okay. So you should at least try to make sure there's academic papers. If there aren't, or if you want to supplement what's written in academia with other stuff, that's fine. So blog posts, especially technical blog posts from companies or engineers at companies, that type of stuff, they're often better than academic papers for learning how things work. Documentation, that kind of thing. Okay. To find academic papers, Google Scholar is probably the best. You can search any topic. It's a little weird. I find the search results are I don't find it that useful. When I just free search for things, it sometimes shows you really weird papers, obscure papers, and then misses the big ones. One thing to pay attention to on Google Scholar is one thing they show you is how many times someone cited the paper, and that's usually a kind of, you can use it as a proxy for quality of the paper. It's definitely not perfect. Okay, it could be a brand new paper, so no one cited it just because it's in 2023, 2024. Okay, so just because it doesn't have citations, it doesn't mean that it's not a good paper. But conversely, if it has a lot of citations, so a lot also depends on age. A lot could be 10, it could be 100, it could be 1,000. But if you look relatively, you see there's 10 papers, one paper has 300 citations and the rest have 2 or 3, right? You found the one that's influential, and usually that's not wrong. Usually a bad paper doesn't get 1,000 citations or 100 citations. Okay, so if it has low citations, it doesn't mean that it's bad, but if it has a lot of citation, it probably does mean that it's good. Okay, so it's sort of an inference in one direction. Yeah, and you can be critical too. You can be skeptical of everything you read. Okay, so just because it got written down and someone published it doesn't mean it's right. So I guess that's the next point. So when you work at the work of others, you should do it critically, and so you should you should think about what they're saying, and especially because you're trying to write about the whole topic. Okay, so you've read a lot of stuff, and academics, we're also kind of like salespeople, right? Like we try and sell you on the pros of our systems and we downplay the cons, or if we try to not even write about them if we can get away with it. And so you can go in and kind of restore balance, okay? So people will try and tell you the best features of their system. And part of what we're going to do in class throughout the course will be like trying to make a fairer comparison between things. You'll see things like evaluation frameworks that do that. So authors may miss or leave out important things. Okay, topics, like I say, it's wide open. Security is also very broad. I like interesting papers. If I get another paper on, I don't know, like WordPress vulnerabilities, or I'm trying to think, like there's a couple smart homes, smart bulbs. There's always like 10 papers that year. Anyways, I'll still mark it fairly, I promise. But if you want me to be happy, try and pick like a weird topic or a niche topic or something like that. And security applies to everything, right? Like whatever you're interested in, there's probably some security dimension to it, okay? So try and pick something you're actually interested in. It will make it easier for you to work on. And if you're really stuck though, one thing you can do is you can go look at the kinds of papers that people write and the kind of topics that people write about. So these are considered the big 4 conferences in security. There's lots of other great conferences, but this is kind of like the top 4 conferences. And when I say go there, like each of these, like I don't know, CCS will publish hundreds of papers a year. Like all these conferences run once a year, and they publish 100 papers, and so and the topics that you write about could be from the 90s, they could be from the 2000s. So just between those 4 conferences, you have thousands of papers to look at. Okay, you're not going to read 1,000 papers. What are you going to do? You're going to go through and just look at the titles, and maybe you pull out 10, 20, 30 titles that look interesting. Then for those titles, you'll read what's called the abstract, which is like a summary of the paper. And then maybe 5 or 6 or 10 of those are interesting. And then you'll look at those 10 papers, and then you'll say, okay, this is the one that I'm interested in, or whatever. The topic of this paper is what I like. Okay, once you have your topic, then you can use Google Scholar. So I mentioned citations. Another thing you can do is every paper has what's called a related work section, sort of a requirement. So I write a paper today about topic A. Everyone else who's written about topic A, I'm actually going to write a survey of their work. And I'll put it in a section called related work or background, or it depends. Different papers might call it different things. But you can read that to get a 1-2 sentence about what all the other papers were about. Okay? So if my paper is written today, all the past research should be covered in my paper. Okay? And all the papers that were written after me will have cited me. Well, maybe not all, they might miss it, but generally. So Google Scholar will show you all the papers that cited my paper, and my paper will tell you about all the papers I'm citing. Okay, so you can basically pick a paper, you can go back in time by looking at its citations, you can use Google Scholar to go forward in time to see who cited it, and then if you do that for a couple of the papers in your stack, you're going to find basically all the papers that are written on the topic. Okay, so that's a good way to like start with one paper that you find interesting and make it 5, 10, 20 papers about it. Okay. Okay. There's one thing I wanted to say I thought I had as a tip here. I'm not seeing it. So let me just say it. It might show up somewhere else. Actually, I think it might come up in the evaluation itself. This is actually a big tip. In order to write a good SOK, a good tip is to phrase the title of your paper as a question. Okay? If you phrase it as a question, then your paper is answering that question. Okay? Then it becomes very clear about what you should write in the paper and what you shouldn't. If you're going to go write a bunch of stuff that doesn't help answer your question, you're only writing it because it's in the paper that you wanted to cover, then get rid of it. Okay? So it's a good way to like kind of keep you on a track. Okay, in terms of the project topics and things like that, you're free to choose them. You're free to choose your own groups or work individually. I'm not clearing anything, okay? All I expect for you is a PDF when it's due, okay? If we never talk about your project between now and then, if the night before you change your topic and your team, like, I don't need to know about that type of stuff, okay? So like all I need from you is that PDF. Does that mean that some different people will write about the same topic? It does. Okay, it happens every year. It's not a problem. I could actually tell all of you to write about the same topic, and I would probably get 50 different takes on the same topic, okay? Different people will write different things. They'll read different things. They'll put the emphasis on the kinds of skills that they have. So that's not a problem at all, okay? That said, I am here to help. So I do want to talk to you about your project, but it's just on a voluntary basis. You don't have to ask me about it, but I do want to talk to you about it, okay? So good times to talk are during the break, after class, office hours, or by email. You can ask whatever. I think this is a good topic. Can you help me narrow it down? Or whatever questions you have. The one thing I won't do is if you say, I've written my report, can you go through it? Can you read it and give me feedback? I can't do that because it would be too much reading, okay? What I will do is I'll look at it for like 2 minutes, which would be enough to see the headers and the pictures, and then I'll tell you about what I think about the flow of it in the 2 minutes that I look at it. But I can't read it I can't read a draft top to bottom and give you detailed feedback on it. Oh yeah, so actually, okay, so this is, I knew it was here somewhere. So this is just rephrasing what I said, which is if you phrase the topic of your paper as a question, whether it's in the title or it's just in the introduction, doesn't matter, then basically you should answer the question in your report, and you should only answer the question. You shouldn't talk about things that don't help you answer the question, okay? And you should cite the resources that you learned how to answer the question, and that's it. If a paper, you read a paper, but it doesn't help you answer the question, then you don't talk about it or even have to cite it. References can be in any format, as long as I can look at the reference, use Google, and find the thing that you're referring to. It doesn't matter like what format it is. And security is very broad, so there's lots of different aspects. Any like kind of personal interests that you have, like, I don't know, music, sports, that kind of stuff, like there's security overlaps with everything, okay? So I encourage you, like, and it's more interesting for me to read, to pick something that you're interested in. Ask yourself at least, or spend some time on Google trying to figure out if people have looked at the security dimensions of that thing, and then you can probably have a project topic that will be more interesting for you than some boring topic. Okay, so the grading will be out of 50. There's basically, the formatting here is weird. I'll try and fix that. But it's sort of broken into 4 kind of categories. So the first I call scope and execution. So this is, a lot of it's just like, why are you telling me this? I'm in the middle of your report and you start talking about topic A. Like, why are you telling me this? What does it have to do with the topic of your whole report? Is it relevant? Are you telling me things that aren't relevant? Is there a really good logical flow? Like, it's very clear, I'm going to tell you about this, and then this is the next thing, and this is the next thing, and it all like kind of makes sense. So that's like the sort of the scope. What's in scope? What's out of scope? How does the paper flow? Is there a reason that everything that's in the paper is there? Does it add to like the actual topic of the paper? And then execution is more like, how well do you do it? So like, is it complete? Do you miss things? Is it comprehensive? You cover every single thing that should be covered. And then is it actually on topic for the course? So does it have a dimension of security, and thinking about what does it mean to be secure or not secure? Is that somewhere in the report itself? Interpretation is sort of like my gauge as to how well you understood the things that you're telling me, okay? So at first, if you write something and it came out of your mouth, you must understand it. You couldn't have written it without understanding it, right? That's what you would think at first. But I can tell you it's very easy to write about things that you don't understand, okay? You can read something, you can know what the words are, and you can repeat the words, but you don't know it. Especially like on more technical things, like say you're doing math and it's encryption, right? So there's some formula for the encryption algorithm. You can put that in your paper, right? It's not plagiarism. You'll cite it. You'll say, okay, this is how RSA encryption works. Here's the equation, right? M to the power of E mod n or whatever, okay? But do you know what that means? Like you can write the equation, sure, but you know it. So interpretation is sort of like I'm trying to gauge like the extent to which you know what you're talking about, okay? It's hard to say how I do it. It's just I read so many of these things that you just kind of get a feel for it. Students that really understand things, they explain it well. It's very succinct, like to the point. They don't miss things. If you don't understand things well, it's easy to miss things. Or do the opposite. You do a really deep dive on something that doesn't really matter, like a small technical point. You do a really deep dive on that, and then you miss the like big picture point kind of things, okay? So if the way you explain things is sort of at different levels of granularity, or it doesn't make sense, or that type of stuff, that's where you would get deductions in this area. The other thing, this is important, maybe you read a paper and you don't understand it. Okay, you read about RSA, it's too late, you're doing your thing on RSA signatures, and you're like, gee, I have no idea, I've never done, I don't know, algebraic, groups, and I don't know what that is. I don't know what a coprime is, semi-prime, I don't know. Okay, tell me in the report. Just say, okay, I'm doing these signatures, and I actually don't understand it. So the authors say that this is what's going on. Okay, this is my understanding. If I draw a black box around it and say, I don't know how that box works on the inside, but my understanding is that when these inputs come into the box, this is what comes out. Okay, this is how you can use the box. Then that's fine for a lot of things. There's a million things I don't understand. I couldn't tell you how they work on the inside, but I'll still write about them. I'll use them in my research because I draw a black box around them and say, I don't understand how it works, but it doesn't matter. You don't have to know how it works. If you know, you don't have to know how it works on the inside, right? If you know how to use it, if you know what it's doing for you, it doesn't actually matter. Like, how does ChatGPT work? I don't know, right? Like, I don't know what a large language model is. I don't know any of that stuff, right? Does that mean I can't use it? No, I can use it, right? On that topic, I should say, going back to plagiarism, so this is sort of like a new thing. So some people think, to what extent can I rely on something like ChatGPT for my class projects, okay? So I'll give you kind of a spectrum. So the kind of thing that wouldn't be allowed is like, hey, ChatGPT, I'm writing a report on smart homes. Can you write 3 paragraphs about them? It writes 3 paragraphs and you copy and paste it into your paper. Okay, so that's plagiarism. Okay. On the other extreme, which is okay, is, hey, ChatGPT, here's 3 paragraphs I wrote myself about smart homes. Can you go through them and make sure there's no grammar mistakes and I didn't miss any of the spelling? Okay? And then it says, oh, actually, you made 2 mistakes here, and why don't you phrase it like this, right? That's okay as well, okay? The middle ground, which I'm going to say is not okay, is I wrote 1 paragraph. Can you take my 1 paragraph and make it into 3? Okay? Because then it's still introducing ideas. So some of the ideas are yours. You are guiding it. It's not like you're completely relying on it. But as long as it's inserting new ideas, it's not okay. If it's fixing the ideas that you have, that's fine. If you're like, hey, ChatGPT, I have this project, it's on this topic, can you recommend some papers that I go read, right? Then that's obviously okay as well, right? Or I didn't understand it, can you give me a summary of what it is, okay? Now you have to be careful, especially if you do the free ChatGPT. If you ask it for papers on a topic, it will make up papers, okay? I asked it for like all the papers that I wrote on a specific topic, and it told me I wrote 100 papers that I never wrote, okay? It just it makes them up, and with people that I know, but I've never actually written a paper with, And it looks real. It's like authors, and there's titles and conferences and all that stuff. So it will hallucinate things like that. So anyways, but you'll actually go and read the paper, right? Another thing for references, it's really great. If you're like, give me the reference for that like RSA paper, then it will just spit it out and it will be formatted perfectly. And if you use LaTeX, it will give it to you in BibTeX, and it's good for that. Okay, so use it. Don't be scared of the technology, but just don't let it introduce ideas for you. Back to the grading scheme. I'm expecting some technical content. Technical it can mean a lot of different things depending on what you're doing, okay? It doesn't mean code. It doesn't mean math. It doesn't mean logic per se. It might mean those things depending on what you're doing, okay? What I'm really looking for is that you don't shy away from the details. So if you get to a complicated part of what you need to explain, you're not like, oh, that's complicated, or I'm just going to use a simple analogy, or you just skip over it altogether, okay? So if to answer your question, that is your project topic, requires looking into technical details, then you have to go through those technical details, okay? It might just be English, like just going through, but you're going through at a level of detail that's technical, okay? So that's what technical means. It just means don't shy away from when things get, have to be said in a very precise way. The presentation is just like sort of what the paper looks like, not like literally the layout, but just like the flow of the paper is good. The sections and subsections like organize the paper well. It gets you from point A to point B. If you use a picture or a table, that's appropriate, meaning it actually is better to use a picture than to try and explain it in words. Or conversely, maybe you have a bunch of pictures and you could have just said that in 3 words, like I don't need a picture for it. Citations sort of come up here. You might have some marks around it, but you're citing appropriately. And that there's just a good amount of work went into the project. Okay, and then the other thing I do, usually I mark your paper according to all of these things, and then the very last thing I do is I once I've done reading your paper, then I'll flip up to the top and just take a note of how many people wrote it, and then I'll try and judge whether I think that's appropriate for the paper that I just wrote, okay? So if you have 4 people and it looks like a paper, the same papers that I've read, like the same quality of paper that I've already read 5 times by single authors, then you could get a deduction, okay? But like I say, I'm not trying to discourage you from working with others or groups. There's, great projects from groups of people. There's great projects from individuals. There's, just actually do what's natural and what you want to do in terms of that. And you shouldn't try to strategize about that. Okay, another thing that you're going to forget by the time it's actually relevant, but I'll say it now, and hopefully I'll say it towards the end of the class, is you'll submit it through Moodle, but you won't get your grade through Moodle. Okay, you will get your assignment grades because they're coming halfway through the course. But when I mark it, I'm not going to mark it on Moodle. I'm just going to put it straight into the final spreadsheet. So basically, your project will be due. You'll have your exam, and then a couple days, week will go by, whatever, and then all of a sudden you'll get an email and there'll be a letter grade. Okay, and so that includes your exam, it includes your project. Once you have that letter grade, you want to shoot me an email saying, what's my breakdown? That's fine. Okay, shoot it to me and I'll tell you the breakdown. If you want to come back and look at your review or review your exam, that type of thing, I'll set a date after the exam when students can come by and look at it. Today, actually, for last term, a bunch of students came and looked at their class. For this class last term, looked at their exam. Okay, that's everything I wanted to say that I can think of. Is there any questions? Yeah.
So you give us lots of flexibility. My question is, are you looking for like an academic way of speaking? What I mean is Professor John Doe stated that
Yeah.
2014, or I checked this paper,
Right.
I like it, which way you prefer?
So I actually prefer more the conversational style. So the second part, I don't like formality. It's awkward to write, it's awkward to read, and it doesn't add anything to the paper itself. But it also depends on your objective. So let's say you want to publish this project report after, and journals aren't going to want to read it in that conversational style, then write it for the journal that you want to. Like, I'll adapt my expectations to however you want to write it. I don't want it to be so informal like a tweet or a blog post. So like it should, when I say a blog post, I'm thinking of like an old school, like a journal, like kind of blog post. Not like there's lots of technical blog posts that are at the exact right level, degree of formality. So, but yeah, I do prefer more on the conversational side. Think of it like a magazine article or a textbook. That's actually a great way. If you want to think of your project as writing the textbook chapter on this particular topic, that's exactly the kind of thing that I want, right? Textbooks, they don't tell you there's 5 papers and here's a summary of them. They're there to teach you about the topic. And if everything you need to know comes from one paper, they're not going to tell you about the other 4, right? Or if you need all 5, then they're going to tell about, yeah. But textbooks are also like, they're friendly to the reader. You can assume also, this is another good point, is write it for your classmates. Don't write it for me. Okay? So you're not writing it for me as an expert. Write it so that you could give it to your friend and then they can understand what your topic is. That's a better style. Again, that can be broken. If you're writing for a journal, you're going to want to write it for me or someone that's even more of an expert for me, and I'll adjust my expectations. But it's perfectly okay. Write it conversational, textbook style for your friend that's sitting beside you. If you do that, then that's great. Okay, other questions about any of this stuff? Okay, good. All right, so what we'll do is we'll take a break, 10 minutes, and then we'll go into the first lecture, and I'll try. It's in Keynote, which is an Apple-only thing, but I'm going to do my best to get it on this other computer. Okay, so I have a PDF of the lecture slides from already on the course, so I'm just going to use it. If there's any like animated bits or something, it's not going to show up, but I think that should be fine. I'm not big on animation. And again, I'm going to try and do it on both screens because this is going on YouTube and this is what you're seeing in the class. They're different, so hopefully I keep them in sync. One thing I wanted to circle back to, there was a good question during the break, which is something I knew was confusing because people have asked me every year the same question, and I always mean to change it but forget to change it. So here I say that for your projects, these are the marks, and there's something here called presentation. This is not a slideshow presentation to me or to the class, which is very common in your other courses. Okay, a lot of courses will have a presentation as well as a report itself, or even just a presentation. What I meant here is like how you present the material in your written report itself, okay? So I'm going to change the name of this, but in the meantime, just know that there's no presentation with it. It's just a written report, and then that's it. Okay, not a big Windows person. I'm just going to do it like this. I know it's not using the whole screen, but anyways. Okay, so it's going to be pretty lightweight, but anyways, I want to take some time to actually introduce you properly to the course. Okay, so the general high-level theme, what's security evaluation methodology? What's this course about? What I envision is someday you're going to get a job when you graduate, hopefully in the security field. You'll show up on the first day of work. Someone's going to hand you something, and they're going to say, okay, you're the security person, so tell me, is this secure or not? That's your job for the next week, month, year, is to tell me whether this is secure or not, okay? And so what do you do? How do you get started? How are you going to go about doing it? You're going to use a methodology, okay? That's what it is. So that's what an evaluation methodology is. You're evaluating whether it's secure or not, and you have to follow some process to determine it or not, okay? How you go about it, what exact methodology you use, that's going to be like across the whole course, okay? But for now, that's the high level thing with the course. Okay, now you might look at this and say, okay, in this course, I'm going to teach you how to answer that question, right? That's a very hard task for me, okay? And I want to convince you why, okay? So the first reason why is there's so many different things that you could be handed, okay? What is X? X could be a software program, right? It could be a computer hardware chip. What else could it be? Any ideas? Just shout it out. So it could be software, it could be hardware. Is there anything else that you care about the security of, or are those the only two things?
A procedure or a guideline.
Okay, so a procedure, guideline, some sort of softer like rules to follow. That's a good one. networks. Okay, so they're kind of hardware, kind of software, kind of in between. There's data that flows across the networks. So data itself, that's another kind of thing.
User awareness, because whatever you apply, if your user is not aware, then
Okay, great. So remember what he said. Okay, if a user can't use your software, it might be the most secure software. Okay, it might actually be perfect in terms of security. If a user can't wrap their heads around it and use it, what are they going to do? They're either going to make mistakes, or they're going to not use it, right? Or they're going to do really insecure things to make sure that they don't have to use it. And so you might actually end up harming yourself in the long run. Okay, but anyways, people is another thing. Okay, so I'm not going to hand you a person literally and say, is this person secure? Okay, but I could hand you something and say, could a person use this? I might say, look at this organization and tell me if someone walked into the organization dressed like an IT staff and said, I need to fix a server in the server room, are you going to let them in? Because if you do, and there's someone like an adversary, right, then there's trouble. Right? So that's kind of policies, procedures. It's social engineering. It has to do with humans, that type of thing. Okay, so here's a kind of list of a bunch of things that I think we hit most of them. This isn't meant to be comprehensive. Okay, there's more to the world of security than this. I'm trying to impress you with how broad security is. Okay, so software, hardware, networks we talked about. Protocols are slightly different. Algorithms like crypto protocols. There's the data. The humans, the organizational policy, procedures, laws. There's also a lot of physical security, like locks, security cameras, that type of thing. That's another whole aspect. Okay, so let's go back to our question. You're given X, you're asked, is it secure? Okay, and you have some method that you're going to use. Okay, is the method that you use for determining whether a policy has a loophole in it the same as determining whether there's a software bug in software? And is it going to be the same thing that's going to let you see that, oh, that crypto algorithm has a vulnerability, it leaks 3 bits of the key? Okay, probably not. Okay, yeah, there are different areas. They're going to have different methodologies. Okay, so this is one of the big challenges of the course is how do you reconcile that? Right? How do I teach you methodologies when every one of these things has a different methodology? There's no one methodology for them. I could teach you a lot about how to do security proofs for crypto protocols. I could fill a whole course with just that. And you'll walk out knowing a lot about crypto and you won't know anything about all of this other stuff. Okay? So how do I solve it? You'll see. Okay? So I have at least a solution because I teach this course every year, twice a year. But anyways, it's a challenge. Okay, so evaluation is going to be hard for a couple reasons. The biggest reason being that there's no one methodology that works for everything. And what I would say more specifically, I should say it doesn't do a great job on everything. Okay, so there are some methodologies that actually do kind of work for everything, but they just give you such high level insights that they're not super useful. Okay. If you want to have like deep, nuanced insights, then you're going to have to use a methodology that's specific to the thing that you're studying. Okay? So one of those high-level methodologies we will talk about this class. So that's what this lecture is going to be, is one of those. Okay, another thing that makes security hard is, like if I ask you, analyze the security of, I don't know, a car, a smart car. Okay, a car has a bunch of computers in it. I want you to figure out whether it's secure or not, or if there's a vulnerability. First thing, before you go looking at the security, you got to understand what the car is actually doing. Like, what are all these computers doing? What are they, what's tied into the computer system, what's not, okay? You can't really start thinking about attacks and breaking a system and what the defenses are in the system until you understand the system itself. Like, just what is it doing at a functional level? What are all the components? Why are they there? And that type of thing, okay? So that also makes this course hard because if you don't know what a crypto protocol is, I can't teach you how to figure out whether it's secure or not. Like before we talk about that, you have to understand what the protocol is. Once you understand the protocol, then we can have a conversation about how you would go about determining whether it's secure or not, okay? So that's another challenge, is that you need to be like kind of a domain expert before you can do the evaluation methodology, okay? So what we'll do in the course is a little bit different for this, depending on the different segments. Sometimes I won't try and make you a domain expert about something. I'll try and pick something that we all know well. okay? And we'll talk at kind of a high level about it. Then for some methodologies, like there's a methodology called an attack tree. I'm going to spend 3 entire lectures on just one topic, okay? And I'm going to make you a domain expert in that topic at the same time that we're looking at how this methodology works, okay? So sometimes we'll do a deep dive on it so you can see what that looks like. Sometimes we'll do it at a high level so you can see what that looks like. So you'll get a bit of everything in the course. Okay, another thing that's kind of weird about security is if I come to you and say this is secure, okay, what does that mean? What does it mean for it to be secure? Well, what you think it means is, well, there's no attack that's possible on this system, okay? Can I ever actually really come to you and say that there's no attack possible? There's no attack today and in the future, and all the attacks that no one's thought of yet, they're not going to work on this system. No, you can't do that, okay? At most, you could say something like, I know of 100 attacks, ways of attacking the system, and there's defenses for those 100 things, okay? It's as secure as it could be given what we know, but there could be 101 attack that completely breaks it, and just no one's ever thought about it before, okay? So security is kind of, you're proving a negative rather than a positive. You're not proving that something is secure, which would be a positive. You're proving that an attack doesn't work. Attack 1 does not work. Attack 2 does not work. Attack 3 does not work, okay? And at the end of that, you hope that it's secure, but it doesn't mean anything beyond exactly that, okay? Proving negatives are kind of weird. An example I like that makes it very easy is, let's say I want you to go to a library and find a book, okay? If I can use positives, I'll say, here's the title of the book, go find it, okay? You'll find the book, whatever. Now imagine I can only give you negative statements. So I'll say, okay, there's a book in the library. It's not a green book. You know, it's not a soft cover. It's not on the 3rd floor of the library. You know, I would have to tell you 500 things before you find that book, right? You know, eventually you might narrow it down and there's only one book left. But does that stop someone from publishing a book next year that matches all the criteria and now there's 2 books and you don't know which one? It doesn't. Okay, so anyway, so security, you'll like never run out of things to do as a security person. Okay, it's one of the best jobs from a job perspective is because there's always new attacks and there's new things to do and things are never like actually 100% secure, right? There's always going to be new ways of breaking things. Okay, my slides somehow the PowerPoint's different than the PDF, but I'll go with, I don't know which version. They're both sort of saying the same thing. Okay, there's no universal evaluation methodology that's going to work for everything. Okay, so more or less you have to choose either I'm going to do something that's specific to a domain, like I'm going to use a software methodology, and not even software, it would have to be more narrow than that. Like I'm going to look at kernels only, or I'm going to look at this, or I'm going to look at it from a control flow perspective, whatever. So you're either going to go really narrow, and then you're really going to test the security of it, okay? Or you can learn some high-level methodologies that will work on software and people and hardware, but they're going to give you high-level insights to go along with it, okay? So those are kind of the choices that you have. You can do something low-level, or you can do it high-level. High-level will apply to everything. And I'll try and teach you both. Okay, and some methodologies, the more you know about it, the more like they're flexible, I'll say. So they can help you get very specific if you can bring that to it. Okay, so high-level methodologies, the pro is that you can apply them to anything. The con is it doesn't go very deep, but they're still useful to know at least to get started. So on day 1, you can use one of these high-level methodologies like Stride, which I'll talk about, to at least get you started, get yourself oriented. Also, part of it is like teaching yourself, but another thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to tell other people, right? You're going to have to give presentations or talk to people or things like that. So you can also think of some of these tools as good ways of presenting that information to other people. It's an organized way. So Stride will be an example of that. So today we'll talk about Stride. Next class, we'll talk about evaluation frameworks. And then the class after, we'll do attack trees, and that's the one we'll do a deep dive on, and I'll try and give you all the domain knowledge that goes along with it, okay? So these three are the high-level methodologies. Once we're done these three, then we'll go on to other topics of security evaluation that are more specific to specific things. Okay, so STRIDE is really simple. This is like really high level. Okay, so it seems kind of simple, but it's still useful, I think, to spend half a lecture on. STRIDE is a mnemonic device, meaning like easy to memorize, and it is similar to something you may have seen before, CIA. So CIA is like, if you want to think about what does security mean, people will say, oh, there's three properties, okay? There's confidentiality, secrets stay secret. There's integrity, things can't be tampered with or changed that shouldn't be changed. And then availability is like it's always, it should be available at all times when you need it, okay? Now, people that use CIA will say, well, what about authentication? Authentication is pretty important, passwords and getting people to log in and that kind of stuff. What is that? Is that confidentiality? Is that integrity? Is it availability? Yeah, it kind of touches on more than one of them, but it also doesn't really fall into them, right? So then what people will say is, oh, we need another one. We need A, authentication. So now it's like CIAA. And then they say, well, authorization, access control, that's also important. It doesn't really fit. So now we have CIAA, and then it kind of gets, yeah. So if you run that experiment to its completion, right, you probably end up with six categories seems like a good number. So that's what STRIDE is. So STRIDE includes the three CIAs. It adds one for authentication. It adds one for two other topics that we'll talk about that are related to authorization. Okay, now you'll notice that there's no CI, well, there is an I, but I'll answer that, why that's the case in a second. Okay, so it adds three additional properties, one with authentication, one with authorization, one with something that sounds weird called non-repudiation. You'll see what that is in a second. This comes from Microsoft Research as well. There's a book about it. The book's on the Moodle. I think you can get it at the library, and you can access the PDF for free through the library system. There's even a game that you can play. I don't know all the details of all the things, and there's some software too that you can use to model it. But the point of this lecture is just to introduce gently security topics, and so we're just going to think about what the six things are, and that's about it. Okay, so STRIDE stands for spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, and escalation of privilege. Okay, so that's the first list. That's what STRIDE means. Unlike CIA, so CIA is telling you the positive. Confidentiality is what you want, right? What STRIDE does is it tells you the opposite. It's what you don't want or what the attacker is trying to do. So that's why it's phrased slightly different. But if you go to the second column, that's the positive that goes with the negative, okay? So spoofing is the attack, and then the defense or the thing that stops spoofing is authentication, okay? You want authentication, you want to stop spoofing. You want integrity, you want to stop tampering. You want non-repudiation, so you want to stop repudiation. You want confidentiality, so you want to stop information disclosure. You want availability, so you want to stop denial of service. You want authorization, you want to stop elevation of privilege. Some people say escalation, some people say elevation. They say elevation, I always say escalation, but for the sake of this course, they're exactly the same. So you can see CIA are there, they're just in the second column, not in the first column. Okay, so there's definitions of all of them, but I actually just have one slide for each, so we'll just go through them. And then I'll talk a bit about it. Okay, so spoofing is just this idea that you're going to impersonate something that you're not. You're going to say that you're something that you're not. Okay, spoofing can happen at a technical level. It can happen at a social level. There's lots of different aspects. That's what makes STRIDE flexible. At a technical level, you can see some examples like in an operating system, you might spoof a process or a file name. I'm not going to go through every line of these slides. I'm just going to give you the high-level overview. The one I'll draw your attention to is under spoofing a file name, it says create a link, changes it, also called race condition or TOP2. So that's time of check versus time of use. This is a very popular category of vulnerabilities now. Okay, the way I explain it is with a physical analogy that doesn't happen in real life, but it's fun, so I'll say it anyways. Let's say you go out with your friends, you go to a bar that serves alcohol. You have to be over 18, I guess, in Quebec to get access to the bar. Okay, how do you prove you're over 18? You have an ID card, passport, something like that. Okay, and who stops you from going in? It depends. So restaurants are set up differently than bars and things like that, but it could be, imagine like a bouncer who's standing outside and checking everyone's ID and letting you in. Okay, all right. So you walk up to the bouncer, you show them the ID. What do they do? It's not a trick question, like just simply, they're looking at your ID. What are they looking for? Okay, so there's two things. One, are you the same person? Right? So they look at your face, they look at the picture, they look at your face, they look at your picture. Yeah, you're the same person. Okay? And then what's the other thing they want to know? What's your date of birth? Are you over 18? They do some mental math or whatever. Okay? All right. So imagine that you're standing there, you hand the bouncer the card. They look at you, they look at your face, they're happy. They look at the card, they look at your birthday, they're happy. They go to hand you back your card. But what you did is when they were staring at your card is you had your friend jump in and take your place. And so when he looks up or she looks up and hands your card back, then they hand it back to your friend who's 17, and then your friend goes in. Okay? That's a time of check versus time of use. They checked the ID, okay? But when they admitted the person switched. Okay? Would that happen in real life? No. I mean, if you were really fast, maybe, or they were looking really closely at it, okay? But it's not going to happen in a bar, so I'm not telling you how to break your underage friends into a bar, okay? Could it happen in a computer? Yes. Absolutely, right? There's no time, there's no speed. Processes get interrupted, they get suspended, right? Okay? So when you do it, and does software check things all the time, right? It's always checking things, okay? So it will do its check, like say it will say, okay, I need to find this file. Does it exist? Do I have access permissions? Is it signed by the operating system? And then it's happy. Then the operating system gets interrupted. It goes and does something else. And in the meantime, someone switches the application to a malicious one. It comes back to the operation. It's like, oh yeah, I remember where I was. I just checked it. Now I'm about to run it. And then it runs it. But now it's a completely different file. Okay? So anyways, that's an example, a sort of sophisticated example of spoofing that's quite common. You can spoof like machines, like so we'll talk even before the end of class about IP spoofing. You'll see a couple other kinds of spoofing like that. We'll do a whole 2 lectures on social engineering. This is basically spoofing a person. Okay, so you pretend to be, you can pretend to be an actual person, right? So you get all these fraud like emails and text messages and things like that. You could spoof being a company. You can do attacks like I mentioned, like dress up like an IT person, walk into a company, try and get access to the server room. That kind of thing. Okay, tampering is basically changing something. You're not supposed to change it. You don't have permission to change it. You find a way to change it anyways. So this is tampering. Again, it could be a digital thing. It could be a file. It could be links or things like that. These attacks can also feed into each other. So you might do a tampering attack that changes a link, and then it's a time of check versus time of use thing. Like you do it after the check. So not every attack fits cleanly. That's just tampering. Sometimes they combine multiple aspects of it. You can change code. So later we'll talk about, for example, HTTPS is a network protocol that tries to protect you from downloading. When you download files, you're sure that the file you're getting is the file that was sent by the server. Okay? Even if there's someone in the middle, they have access to your data. If they tamper with it, you'll detect it, and then you won't accept the file. You can also redirect things. We'll talk about that later. Modify data going over the network. Okay. Repudiation is this idea that something happened. It actually happened for real, but you're going to deny it. And you're going to say, no, that didn't actually happen. Okay? So I order something off of Amazon. It comes. I, take it in my house. And then I call up Amazon a few days later and say, hey, I'm still waiting on this package. Where is it? Right? And they say, well, now they take pictures of it on your porch or whatever. So there's some, to try and prevent this kind of attack. But it used to be the case that they say, you know what? We don't know. So here's your money back. Okay. Now you might think, oh, this is awesome. I'm going to order lots and lots of stuff from Amazon. Of course, you do it the first time, yeah, you get your money back. You do it the second or third time, then you have the police showing up at your door, right? So some of the times repudiation is not repeatable, right? You can only do it once. But anyways, there's a whole line of attacks that fall along this line of repudiation. Logs are one thing that tries to prevent it, to provide non-repudiation. So you log everything that happens. Of course, you can still tamper with logs as well. Information disclosure is basically extracting information that you shouldn't have access to. Okay, it breaks confidentiality. So it could be breaking encryption to get information. It could be cracking into a database in order to get it using like weird queries, like SQL injection, or to dump the table. Heartbleed is something that we'll talk about specifically. It's an attack that worked on servers, and you could dump the contents of RAM of the server using an exploit. Denial of service is you're going to prevent something from working correctly, or you're going to delay it, or stall it, that type of thing. So again, we'll see lots of examples in the class. There's some times where you do checks, like I just received something, I want to know whether this is right or wrong. So I check with someone that knows, and I don't get an answer. Okay? What do you do in that case? Do you fail every time you don't get an answer? Well, you might be able to do that if it's a very reliable server, but if it's a server that's overwhelmed all the time, then you would be failing all the time, and then users don't like it because it's not a good user experience. So we'll talk about a specific, very important security check that your browser actually just ignores if it doesn't get a response because they fail so often. Okay? So anyway, so that would be an example. There's classic denial of service, like I want to knock you off the network kind of thing. I'll give an example of that just in terms of how that works. Now it's kind of interesting. So it used to be the case that if I want to knock you off the network, how do I get you off the network? I just hit you with as much traffic as I can. Okay, that's more or less it. If my bandwidth's bigger than yours, you're done. And if your bandwidth is bigger than mine, then it's annoying for you. You're going to have to process a lot of traffic, but you won't go down, kind of thing. Okay, so that it's just a pure numbers game. Can you get the incoming traffic into a website big enough that it exceeds its capacity? So traditionally, that would mean you would spam the website as fast as you could. You would write a script that would just send messages over and over and over again. But nowadays, you can't really do that because these websites, if it's a big website, it's going to have more bandwidth than you. Okay? So what do you do? Any ideas? Okay, so you ask your friends to do it at the same time as you. Okay? Or you go and you rent a botnet. You rent a bunch of friends because you don't have friends that are willing to do it. So you go pay them. You only pay your friends for an hour, but you get complete control of their computers. They're also all over the world. Okay, so if there's like ISPs and blocking that happens on the back end, it's hard to like shut down an entire botnet because they're all over the world. Okay, so you get a bunch of friends. So now we're not just denial of service, we're distributed denial of service. Okay, DDoS. Now this was common for a while, but it's not actually the preferred method. There's an even better way of doing it. And so it's a little complicated to explain, but it's kind of fun, so I thought I would do it. So forget about denial of service for a sec. Just think about this general kind of thing. Imagine there's a server and you can ask it things like, what time is it? And then the server will tell you what time it is. Okay? Now, me asking a server what time is it, there's a certain packet length. Okay? That has a certain length. Okay? And it's 1935, that also has a packet length. Okay? And asking what is the time and getting the actual time are probably about the same. Okay? They're about the same size. Okay? But imagine that I could ask for something and get a response that's much bigger than what I asked for. Like, hey, can you give me the certificate chain for google.com? And then it says, yeah, no problem. Here's here's a certificate and a signature, and it's signed by this other person, and here's their signature, and here's their other certificate, and here's their signatures, right? And the whole thing is 10 times bigger than what you asked for, okay? This is what we want to exploit. So for a bad person, adversary, we want to do denial of service. That seems like something that's maybe exploitable. What we'd like to do is, obviously, if we ask it, what time is it, what time is it, what time is it, and it keeps sending it back to us, we're denial of servicing ourselves, okay? What I'd like to do is actually, is there a way I could redirect the responses to someone else? So I ask the requests, they're really short, and then when the server responds, it sends the response to someone else. Okay. Now we can use another thing in Stride. We can use S, which is spoofing. Okay. So what I do is I do what's called IP spoofing. And I say, I send the request from my IP address, but how does it know it came from my IP address? There's no like receipts or anything like that. It's because I write that in the packet. So I just say, and I want to write my actual IP address, because if I don't, then when I ask for stuff, it's not going to come back to me. So generally when you're using the web right, you know, it's just like you send someone mail, you put your return address. You don't have to put your return address. You could put someone else's return address, right? There's nothing that like physically stops you. It's just that you won't get the mail back, okay? But you can do that in this case, okay? So you can write someone else's IP address in. Now you can ask for the request, and the response will go to the other person instead, okay? But there's a problem with it, okay? So the problem with it, so this is just showing you that the requests, I'll ask the request, and then the response will go to the victim. The problem with it is the web works over this protocol called TCP, okay? And in TCP, before I ask you what time it is, I first have to make a connection with you, okay? And that involves some back and forth. So I have to say hi, and then you say hi back, and then I say, what time is it? Okay? Now the problem is, let's break that down. I tell the server hi from Concordia, then the server says hi Concordia to Concordia, and then Concordia says, I never said hi to you, why are you saying hi to me? And then it just drops it. Okay? So this is called a handshake. So a handshake means, you know, both parties are expecting things, and if they don't get the things that they're expecting, they won't even start exchanging data. Okay, so this attack doesn't work because TCP requires a handshake. Okay, but there's still hope for the adversary, which is TCP is a main protocol, but it's not the only one. Okay, in fact, there's another protocol that's called UDP, and UDP explicitly does not do handshakes. Why does it not do handshakes? Well, it's usually used for actually streaming like high volumes of data. Like say you're watching something on Netflix, they're streaming it to you. Another thing TCP does is it does a lot more than handshakes. It will make sure you never drop a packet, right? So you get all the packets, they're numbered, and you realize there's a hole in the packets you received. You'll keep asking for that missing packet until you get it, okay? But there's sometimes, like say you're watching Netflix, and it's a movie, it's choppy because it's, you know, it's a high definition video and your internet's kind of choppy. And so you watch it, packets start dropping, the picture gets a little fuzzy, right? And then you move past that point in the movie. Is there a point to ask for all those packets that you missed? No, like, I mean, you're already past it anyways. It got fuzzy for a bit and now it's back to normal. Okay, you'd rather just drop them. So it's a sort of like best effort. Like I'll send them to you. If you get them, great. If you don't, then who cares? We all move on. Okay, that's what UDP's for. Okay, and so it's meant to have the least amount of overhead. And so one of the things it does is it doesn't do the handshake because that would also add latency. Okay, so UDP could be used. Okay, so you can do IP spoofing with UDP. You can't do it with TCP. So can we make this denial of service attack work? What do we need? What we need is, well, who's that server in the middle, right? Who's the server, and do they actually have these kinds of things that they offer over UDP? Like, what time is it? And then they tell you the time, but they do it over UDP and not over TCP, okay? So now what people did, this is actually kind of old at this point, but they went around the internet and they studied every single UDP protocol that servers had, and they measured like the request size and the response size, and they came up with a bunch of things that looked like candidates that would work. And there's a bunch of them. And so one of them is actually this what time is it? Okay, so there is a protocol called what time is it, called the network time protocol. Almost every server, not today, but before these attacks became prevalent, had it turned on. Okay, almost no one used it, but it was always there and it was always turned on. Okay, and this is like mainframe servers on the backbone of the internet that are put there by Bell and Rogers and have a ton of bandwidth. Okay, these are the servers that would offer that service. Okay, you could, if you knew their IP address, you could just say what time is it and they would tell you. Okay, now beyond what time is it, you could also say things like, tell me the last 20 people that connected to you and ask you what time it is. Now all of a sudden you're getting a response that's 10 times bigger than the question that you're asking. Okay, so that's what people would do, is they would say, give me the list. And they would say, give me the list, give me the list, give me the list, give me the list as fast as they possibly could. These big mainframes were able to take that traffic, and then they would create responses that were 10 times bigger and send them just as fast over UDP to the spoofed target, which is Concordia. And so now, as much bandwidth as I have, it's being amplified to 10 times bigger. So I'm hitting Concordia with 10 times more traffic than I can produce myself. Okay? Now, what if we combine that with our previous attack? Okay, we get a botnet and we get all our friends on the botnet to do this as well. Okay, so now we have all the traffic of the botnet. We hit these servers, we amplify it 10 times or 20 times or 100 times, and now our botnet's hitting it with 100 times more. Okay, so this is called amplification denial of service, reflection denial of service, sometimes to get that idea that you're reflecting off of these servers. Network time protocol is one thing. There's a bunch of other ones that work. There are other things that work over UDP. The DNS thing is one as well, DNSSEC, which is you ask for all the certificate information that goes along with the domain. What people are doing now is they're trying to plug it by either turning it off. Like, who cares who the last 10 people are? You probably shouldn't be telling random people on the internet the last 10 people that connected to you anyways. And so a lot of these services are being disabled now. Or you're switching from UDP to TCP. Okay, we used to do DNS over UDP, but now we have these amplification problems, so let's do it over TCP instead. Okay, so these things don't all work, but anyways, there's people out there still searching for these kinds of protocols, trying to find them. Okay, so the last category is escalation or elevation of privilege. This one's like a little more obscure, but it doesn't really fit cleanly in the others, so that's why it's its own category. It basically has to do with what are you allowed to do in a system. So you can call that what you're authorized to do, authorization. You can, sometimes it's called access control, like you have read access to this file you can't read or write, this other directory you can read and write and execute. So that's all authorization. Sometimes it's called permissions, so like on your phone, can this app access your camera? Yes or no, that's a permission, okay? So all of this has to do with authorization. You get a set of authorizations, okay, or your privilege. And if you can find some way, some exploit to get you more privileges than you're supposed to have, then that's considered escalation of privilege, okay? So the main high-level goal would be computers aren't, like 20 years ago, everyone logged into their computer with an account. Like when you turn your computer on, it usually just auto-logged in. And that account had full permission to do anything. It could write any file on the disk. It could install any software. It could install it anywhere. It could change the operating system, whatever. Okay? That doesn't work that way anymore. Okay? Every modern operating system has a permission system. You can still change your operating system if you want to, but you're going to have to put a password in. You're going to have to put your fingerprint in, whatever. You're going to have to give permission. Okay? And so what people are always trying to do is break out of these boxes without asking the user permission. Okay? So the best would be if you could come to my website and somehow, if you're in my website, that should be like in the browser window. It shouldn't even go to the browser, right? But somehow I'm able to break out of the website into the browser. So now it's executing in the browser. Then I'm able to break out of the browser to your operating system. And then I'm able to break out of like the operating system to your like your root of your computer, right, and have access. Then I can install malware on your computer just by visiting a website, okay? So that shouldn't work, right? In today's modern world, you shouldn't be you shouldn't get infected with malware just from, if you just visit a website, you don't click on anything, you don't install anything, all you do is open that website and look at it. There's no way you should get malware that's permanent on your computer in your kernel. Okay, and that's because everything is in sandboxes and sandboxes and sandboxes. Okay, so escalation of privilege is the kinds of things, and people will chain a bunch of exploits all the way together, and they're very big and complicated these days, and it might go through 30 different services, but eventually they'll work their way into your operating system from a website or something like that. That's a pretty extreme example, but like opening an Excel file and having malware installed, that's not so extreme. Okay, we'll see an example of that a little later in class. Okay, I had a recap on, not on the slides on the website, but on the other side, so I'll just go through them. Okay, so that's all I want to say today. I just want to keep it light. So it was about Stride. Remember, Stride is this high-level methodology. Okay, so just by looking at something for the first time and saying, is there spoofing attacks? Are there tampering attacks? Is there information disclosure? You're not going to get very far with it. Okay, but the positive of it is you can literally apply to anything. Okay, you can look at procedures, you can look at software, you can look at hardware, you can look at a protocol, and it works for that as well. Okay, so that's Stride. Next time we'll do something a little more detailed called the evaluation framework, and then we'll go into attack trees. Are there any questions before we go? All right, good. So I'll see you all next week.